Welcome back to another Wikipedia Clickhole, where we navigate our way through a series of random articles to some unknown destination. Thanks to Gladwin, we start this Clickhole with Robert Louis Stevenson, a Scottish writer who ended up in Samoa. We look at the Hawaiian king Kalakaua, who was the last king of Hawaii, and from there we click on a very strange name for a Masonic group, which leads us to the wonderfully named Military Order of the Cootie. What a surprise that was. We navigate to the comedy portal, where we look at a documentary about the word f*** and how the word f*** made it all the way to the Supreme Court in Cohen versus California. Hello waffles and gentlemen. It's been a while since we've had a suggestion in the comments, but we are very fortunate that we have one today. Thank you Gladwin, who says, as you ended on Jekyll, here's my suggestion. Robert Louis Stevenson. So let's get started. Here we are, Robert Louis Stevenson, with an extremely dashing moustache. Oh my god, he died in Samoa, but was born in Scotland? And he was only 44? How did that happen? Oh, well, I guess we'll get there. So, he was most noted for writing Treasure Island, Kidnapped, Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and A Child's Garden of Verses. He was born and educated in Edinburgh, but he suffered from serious bronchial trouble for much of his life. But, despite being in poor health, he continued to write all the time and travelled. Clearly, if he ended up in Samoa, geez. He mixed in literary circles in London, and oh, there it is, he settled in Samoa in 1890. He was alarmed at the increasing European and American influence in the South Sea Islands. So his writing turned away from romance and adventure and went more towards a darker realism. He was a celebrity during his lifetime. That's kind of unusual. A lot of these artists are not famous while they're alive. But his critical reputation has fluctuated since his death, though today his works are held in general acclaim. 2018 he was ranked just behind Charles Dickens as the 26th most translated author in the world. That's not bad for a guy who died at 44. Packed a lot in. Wow, this is an extensive page. Okay, let's skim through for some interesting nuggets. He was christened Robert Louis Balfour, but at 18 he changed the spelling of Lewis with a W, with an OU instead, and he dropped Balfour. I wonder why. Lighthouse design was the family's profession. Looks like there was bad health in the family. So he inherited a tendency to coughs and fevers, which exacerbated when the family moved to a damp, chilly house. Yeah, no wonder he moved to Samoa, it makes sense now. His nurse, Alison Cunningham, known as Cummy, that did not age well in this day and age. We would not refer to somebody by this particular nickname. Anyway, so the nurse known as Cummy was fervently religious, of all things to be, with the nickname Cummy, and her mix of Calvinism and folk beliefs were an early source of nightmares for him, and so he showed a precocious concern for religion. But she also cared for him tenderly in illness, and read to him John Bunyan and the Bible as he lay sick in bed. So I guess he had this really weird relationship with storytelling, that this woman gave him nightmares, but also kind of introduced him to the thing that would make most of his life and career. Stevenson was an only child, both strange-looking and eccentric. He doesn't look that strange to me. Let's take a closer look. I mean, aside from the fact that nobody would wear this today, which is fine because times change, he looks pretty normal. He found it hard to fit in when he was sent to a nearby school at age 6. I don't know, he doesn't look that weird. He showed no enthusiasm in university for his studies, and so he devoted much energy to avoiding lectures. I tell you, last time when we looked at Stanley Kubrick, he did this as well. Geniuses always skip class, which by no means is a good excuse to skip class, but you know. So he started hanging out with some artsy people, and generally was moving away from his upbringing. His dress became more bohemian. He had long hair, he wore a velveteen jacket, and rarely attended parties in conventional dress. He visited cheap pubs and brothels. All the best artists of this period did. Oh, and he declared himself an atheist. That's a bold move for the 19th century. His father was devastated, and his mother called it the heaviest affliction to befall her. Stevenson wrote to his friend, "Oh Lord, what a pleasant thing it is to have just damned the happiness of probably the only two people who care a damn about you in the world." Yeah, well, you gotta do what you gotta do. Oh, his wife was born in Indianapolis. That's interesting. I did not assume she was going to be American. She had married him at age 17 and moved to Nevada to rejoin her husband after his participation in the American Civil War. but she separated because her husband was unfaithful. And then in 1875 she took her children to France, where she and her daughter studied art, and she was a magazine short story writer of recognised ability, and that's how she met Stevenson. But they would not become lovers until 2 years later, and he eventually went to be with her in France and spent some time there. She travelled to San Francisco. My god, the amount of travelling that went on at this time, it always surprises me because it was so difficult. But Stevenson stayed in Europe, and he made a walking trip that formed the basis for Travels with a Donkey in the Cevennes. But then he joined her in 79, of course against the advice of his friends and without notifying his parents. I mean, I don't know why they even thought he would. He was near death when he arrived in Monterey, California, where some local ranchers nursed him back to health. He recovered enough to continue in San Francisco, where he struggled all alone on 45 cents a day. Fanny was finally divorced and recovered from her own illness, and they got together and got married in 1880. So they were a sickly couple that loved each other anyway. That's kind of cute. Oh, but they settled back in England. But I thought he needed warm weather. Why didn't he just stay there? He was so sick he was largely bedridden and described himself as living like a weevil in a biscuit. That is not a glamorous description, but one perfectly apt for a prolific writer. Anyways, Dad died in 1887. Leaving Stevenson free to follow the advice of his physician to try a complete change of climate. He headed for Colorado. That's not warm enough year-round. And New York, also not warm enough. Anyway, they lightheartedly planned a cruise to the Southern Pacific, and they stayed for a while in Hawaii, where he became a good friend of the King Kalakaua, and he befriended the king's niece, Princess, who actually had Scottish heritage of all things. He spent time in Tahiti and the Samoan Islands. He composed ballads and did lots of writing. Let's check out picture. This is him with his wife in their household in Samoa. They're wearing a lot of clothes for Samoa, man. I would not be wearing this in tropical heat. There's some sweaty thighs in there. Sweaty pits and thighs. Oh, here's another family portrait. Do you like old photos? I suppose he is kind of funky looking. He sort of looks like he's never grown up. Her face looks like I've seen it yesterday. Like, these people all look very 1800s, but she looks like I saw her getting a latte, you know? It's funny how some people just don't look like they fit their time period. So they had 314 acres in Samoa where they decided to settle. That is very luxurious. And he immersed himself in the island's culture, occasioned a political awakening. He understood that an indigenous clan society was unprepared for the arrival of foreigners who played upon its existing rivalries and divisions. No longer content to be a romancer, he became a reporter and an agitator. So essentially he sided with the Polynesians. As much as he claimed to disdain politics, he felt obliged to take sides and said, "I used to think meanly of the plumber, but how he shines beside the politician." Yeah, that hasn't changed. That has not changed. This is interesting. He was alarmed, most of all, by what he perceived to be the Samoans' economic innocence. So in a few months before he died, he addressed the island chiefs and wrote, "There is but one way to defend Samoa. It is to make roads and gardens and care for your trees and sell their produce wisely. And, in one word, to occupy and use your country. If you do not occupy and use your country, others will." But 5 years after he died, the Samoan Islands were partitioned between Germany and the US. Alas. On December 3rd, 1894, Stevenson was talking to his wife and straining to open a bottle of wine when he suddenly exclaimed, "What's that?" Asked his wife, "Does my face look strange?" and collapsed. He died within a few hours, probably of a cerebral hemorrhage. The Samoans insisted on surrounding his body with a watchguard during the night and on bearing him on their shoulders to nearby Mount Vaea, where they buried him on a spot overlooking the sea on land donated by British acting Vice-Consul Thomas Trude. Stevenson was loved by the Samoans, and his tombstone epigraph was translated to a Samoan song of grief. Wow, he was only there a short period of time and he made such a great impression. That's very wholesome. That's lovely. They really cared for him. So he was a celebrity in his own time, being admired by many writers, one of whom said that he seemed to pick the right word up on the point of his pen. But he was seen for much of the 20th century as a second-class writer, and became relegated to children's literature and horror genres, condemned by figures such as Virginia Woolf. That sucks, but the late 20th century brought a re-evaluation of him as an artist of great range and insight. Well, he travelled so much everywhere that there are loads of monuments and commemorative art, which is pretty cool. Oh my god, John Singer Sargent painted him? That's an honour. Jeez. So he really floated around in artsy circles. God, he really dabbled in everything. Plays, travel, poetry, non-fiction, short stories. He wrote it all. I'm impressed. Wow, well thank you, Gladwin. This was so much more interesting than I expected, actually. Let's check out King Kalakaua. Kalakaua? I don't know how to pronounce it. We're gonna go with Kalakaua. Holy crap, I don't think I can read this. I'm gonna give it a try. David La'amea Kamanana Kapu Mahinulani Naloae Huokalani Lumialani Kalakaua. That is a mouthful. Sometimes called the Merry Monarch. I wonder if that's merry as in happy. Anyway, he was the last king and penultimate monarch of the Kingdom of Hawaii. Oh yeah, because I think it was a queen was the last monarch. Reigning from 1874 until his death, which was 1891. Oh my god, he died in San Francisco? This is the second article in a row where I'm curious as to how somebody died so far away from where they started. So during his reign he had a treaty which brought great prosperity to the kingdom, and its renewal continued the prosperity, but it allowed the US to have exclusive use of Pearl Harbor. In 1881 he took a trip around the world to encourage the immigration of contract sugar plantation workers. He wanted Hawaiians to broaden their education beyond their nation, so he had a program which sponsored qualified students to study abroad. But he had extravagant expenditures and plans for a Polynesian confederation, which played into the hands of annexationists who were already working towards a United States takeover of Hawaii, and he was pressured to sign a new constitution that made the monarchy an honorary role. He named his sister as heir apparent following the death of their brother, and she's the one who became the last monarch of Hawaii. Oh boy, it's another long article. Jeez, okay. God, we know he was born at 2 a.m. How specific. There he is as a 14-year-old. God, he just looks exactly the same as this picture, but without facial hair. He really didn't change that much. He looks the same. This is interesting. He and his siblings were hanai, or informally adopted, to other family members in the native Hawaiian tradition. So his parents had promised to give him to a high-ranking chiefess and widow of a high chief. But after he was born, the high chiefess took him to the residence of the king, and he just got kind of passed around. That's really strange. In school, he became fluent in English and the Hawaiian language, and was noted for his fun and humour rather than academic prowess. He was strong-willed and defended his less robust elder brother. Oh, his poor older brother. What a legacy to leave on Wikipedia that you are less robust. Bless him, that's sweet. Oh my god, their grandfather murdered his own wife, and they witnessed the public hanging of their grandfather at the gallows. It was the American missionaries who took them to see it. That must have been really traumatic for the boys. And the cooks, the missionaries, clearly were indifferent to the whole thing. That's gross. I'm grossed out. Anyway, following his formal schooling, he studied law under Charles Coffin Harris. How is your middle name Coffin? Kalakaua appointed him as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Hawaii in 1877. But Coffin as a middle name? Damn. He travelled around a lot, and he even met Mark Twain when he was really young, who described him as a man of fine presence. He was briefly engaged to marry a princess, but it was terminated because she renewed her on and off betrothal to her cousin. So he would later fall in love with Kapiolani, and they never had children. I'm interested in this Polynesian Confederation. What would that have been like if that had actually happened? Essentially, the goal was to unite the whole Polynesian race with Hawaii at the top of the empire, making Honolulu a monarchical Washington, where the representatives of all the islands would convene in Congress. But of course, the US, Great Britain, and Germany were like, no, we can't have that. So they expressed their disapproval of a Samoan-Hawaiian Confederation treaty. And Germany just straight up sent some warships. Amaliatoa surrendered and was sent into exile. Damn. And that was the end of that. God, that really changed history. So before he died, he sailed to California, but there was uncertainty about the purpose of the trip. And a Minister of Foreign Affairs reported that it was solely for his health and would not extend beyond California. Local newspapers and British Commissioner worried that he might go further to DC to negotiate a continued cession of Pearl Harbor to the US. But he never seems to have left San Francisco. Yeah, he arrived in California, in San Francisco. His health had been declining, and he stayed at the Palace Hotel. And he just traveled throughout Southern California and Northern Mexico, and he suffered a minor stroke in Santa Barbara and was rushed back to San Francisco. And against the advice of the doctor, he insisted on going to his initiation at the ancient Arabic Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine. That's where we're going next. That is exactly where we're going next. So he was given a tonic that got him on his feet, and he managed to complete the rites, and was returned to his suite where he died. He fell into a coma first, but then he died. Seemingly his official cause of death was inflammation of the kidneys. It was his reign that introduced the ukulele to the Hawaiian Islands. The ukulele isn't Hawaiian? No. It was brought by Portuguese immigrants from Madeira and Cape Verde, and the king became proficient on the instrument. Wow, they totally took ownership of the ukulele. That is hilarious. I did not know that. Okay, we need to find out about that. Ancient Arabic Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine. Yes. Oh, it's Shriners. Is that what they're called? Ancient Arabic Order of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine? What? Shriners International describes itself as a fraternity based on fun, fellowship, and Masonic principles of brotherly love, relief, and truth. The organisation is best known for the Shriners Hospitals of Children and the red fezzes that members wear. Yes, we covered fezzes in another Wikipedia Clickhole. It's funny how we end up crossing over. What is it about my Clickholes that I always end up in secret groups and fezzes, apparently? So they were a bunch of Freemasons in Manhattan, and they discussed making a new fraternity, stressing fun and fellowship. And two guys, a Walter and a William, took it seriously enough to act upon the idea. And William Florence, who was an actor, was on tour in Marseille and was invited to a party given by an Arab diplomat. The entertainment was something in the nature of an elaborately staged musical comedy, and at its conclusion, the guests became members of a secret society. Florence took copious notes and drawings at his initial viewing, and on two other occasions, once in Algiers and once in Cairo. When he returned to New York, he showed his material to Fleming, who created a ritual emblem and costumes. They adopted a Middle Eastern theme and soon established temples. The first temple established was the Mecca Temple, now known as Mecca Shriners, at the New York City Masonic Hall. I mean, what? By 1938, there were about 340,000 members in the US. The whole Middle Eastern theme is so random. Like, was it just out of sort of fascination and interest that they just thought, hey, that looks cool? Or was it deeper than that? Because they don't seem to describe. Shriners often participate in local parades, which include an oriental band dressed in cartoonish versions of Middle Eastern dress. Why? But until 2000, before being eligible for membership in the shrine, a Mason had to complete the Scottish Rite or the York Rite. Do they have any idea what culture they are? They have no clue what they want to be. No idea. But they make children's hospitals, so that's good. I can't hate on that. They have practiced hazing rituals. In 1991, a would-be Shriner sued over injuries suffered during the hazing, which included being blindfolded and having a jolt of electricity applied to his bare buttocks. Oh dear. So they opened up their first children's hospital in Louisiana, and by the end of the decade, 1920s, 1930s, there were 13 more hospitals. And today they provide orthopedic care, burn treatment, cleft lip and palate care, and spinal cord injury rehabilitation. Wow, they do a lot of work, man. So until 2012, all care at the hospitals was provided without charge to patients and their families. But because the size of their endowment had decreased due to losses in the stock market, they had to begin billing insurance companies, but still offered free care to children without insurance, and waived all in out-of-pocket costs that insurance did not cover. Oh, okay. So your insurance covers whatever it can, and then they cover whatever's remaining. Oh, that's decent. They didn't, cheap out. Oh, but they are a non-profit, so yeah, they have to spend all that money. Oh, there's the fez. What is this? Is this one of they have, the miniature cars in the parades. God, they are about fun. No wonder they started a children's hospital, to be honest. They're like, you know what, we could do with some cheering up some kids. So we're gonna be the fun Masons. We are gonna party and parade and have small cars. And we're gonna have a blast and do good work. Do they have any controversies? They don't seem to. Nope, they are controversy-free, apparently. Unless I missed something. See also Military Order of the Cootie. Yes, Military Order of the Cootie is what we're looking at. It is a National Honor Degree membership association separately constituted as a subordinate and as an auxiliary order chartered by the veterans of foreign wars of the United States. Really? Okay, why is it called Military Order of the Cootie? The name Cootie is a reference to the lice that plagued soldiers in World War I. Cooties were credited with keeping soldiers' heads down in the trenches. What? A meeting of cooties is called a scratch. Cooties? Wait, Military Order of the Cootie. So it was kind of, they memed themselves because it was founded in 1920, so basically post-World War I. And so they were like, you know what, remember that time that we had lice in our hair in the trenches? Let's just meme it. George Bush Sr. and Harry Truman are notable cooties. You heard it here first, folks. You heard it here first. Wow, that's hilarious. What's in the comedy portal? Mr. Bean is in the comedy portal. Oof, this is a big portal. Great quote from George Carlin. I think it's the duty of the comedian to find out where the line is drawn and cross it deliberately. Yes, I agree. George is the best. There is a page here that's just called Fuck and Film in parentheses. It is a documentary film about the titular word, and it argues that the word fuck is an integral part of societal discussions about freedom of speech and censorship. Scholars and celebrities analyze perceptions of the word from differing perspectives. They talk about the versatility of it, and that it can be understood despite one's language or location. Ooh, the film features the last recorded interview of Hunter S. Thompson before his suicide. Anderson was exposed to public conceptions surrounding the word fuck by comedian George Carlin's monologue, 7 Words You Can Never Say on Television. He named the film Fuck despite anticipating problems with marketing. Fuck's reviews were generally mixed. What? I give it a 10 out of 10. The word fuck is used 857 times in this film, so people disliked its repetitiveness. I mean, what do you expect? The film is called Fuck and it's about the word, so it's gonna appear. It begins with a segment from a 1965 propaganda film called Perversion for Profit. It was a propaganda film financed through Citizens for Decent Literature. Oh yes, that sounds exciting, doesn't it? Followed by a clip from SpongeBob SquarePants, specifically from the episode Sailor Mouth, which states that the word can be used as a sentence enhancer. It's one of the all-purpose words. It's the ultimate bad word. The track listing for the soundtrack is hilarious. Obviously the word fuck is in it a lot. If I had the copyright, the F-word song, Hot Dog Man, of all things. A Chat with Your Mother, appropriate for a documentary called The F-Word. That must have been an amazing job to be selecting songs for this soundtrack. Anyway, the director, Steve Anderson, decided to research the film's topic due to the word's versatility and his interest in language use as a writer. He was fascinated with the word fuck because of its different uses. Why is Madonna on Late Late Show with David Letterman here? The appearance was noted for an extremely controversial series of statements and antics by Madonna, which included many expletives. In particular, she said the word fuck 14 times. Okay, Madonna, nice job. Cohen versus California. Let's see what that is. A landmark decision of the US Supreme Court holding that the First Amendment prevented the conviction of Paul Robert Cohen for the crime of disturbing the peace by wearing a jacket displaying "Fuck the Draft" in the public corridors of a California courthouse. That's important. Court ultimately found that displaying a mere 4-letter word was not sufficient justification to allow states to restrict free speech, and that free speech can be restricted only under severe circumstances beyond offensiveness. The ruling set a precedent used in future cases concerning the power of states to regulate free speech in order to maintain public civility. It was a jacket. Is there a picture of the jacket? No? No picture of the jacket. That's a shame. Sounds pretty iconic. He should have sold merch after that. If it was 2020, there would be a massive merch sale. So he claimed he wore the jacket in an act of protest against the Vietnam War, to inform others of the depth of the feelings. He was convicted of violating Section 415 of the California Penal Code, which prohibited maliciously and willfully disturbing the peace or quiet of any neighborhood or person by tumultuous or offensive conduct, and sentenced to 30 days in jail. But it was not sufficient. God, it was a 5-4 decision. That was a close call. Jeez. As Justice Harlan said in the decision, while the particular 4-letter word being litigated here is perhaps more distasteful than most others of its genre, it is nevertheless often true that one man's vulgarity is another's lyric. Well done, Justice John Harlan. You saved the word fuck. Well, I think we'll end this clickhole here. If you enjoyed this clickhole, please leave a like, subscribe, and share if you are so inclined. Let me know if you learned anything interesting here, and feel free to make a suggestion for a starting point next time. Otherwise, we will begin with a random article. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!